Hi everybody. This is part 2 of my series with 1-point perspective. If you have not looked at part 1, I encourage you to do so because it will show you how to set up forms in 1-point perspective. What we're doing with part 2, I'll do a slight review, but it will really benefit you to go ahead and go back and look at video part 1. Really important. What I've done here is done some unusual forms with the exception of the rectangle, which is not that unusual. And I'm going to show you how to create these in 1-point perspective. I drew them ahead of time just to save time. One of the first things I'm going to do though is I'm going to erase the horizon line behind these two forms because our forms are not transparent. Quick review. Remember, the horizon line is your eye level. Everything above the horizon line you're looking up at. Everything below the horizon line you're looking down upon. All right, another review. Little dot right here. Vanishing point, because it's 1-point perspective. Remember, we only have 1 point. And what function does that serve? Every line that appears to be going off into the distance ends at the vanishing point. Okay, quick review here. In part 1, we did cubes and rectangular cubes, so I'm going to create that now. Remember, with 1-point perspective, you always draw the flat shape first, okay, no matter what. So I've drawn my rectangle. I'm going to take my straight edge and I'm going to draw a line from the 4 corners. Well, let me restate that. I'm going to look at the 4 corners and I'm going to see from which ones I can draw a line to the vanishing point without going through the original shape. I can't draw one from here or here because it goes through the shape, but I can draw one from the top left corner. Draw my line down, and remember, draw lightly. I draw dark so the camera can pick it up. From the top left corner and from the bottom left corner. And remember, you have to use the vanishing point. You can't fudge it and just kind of do a little bit. Now, because I don't want my form going all the way off into the distance, I have to cut it off or end it. I do that in this case by using the vertical line. I line my straight edge up, and without turning it this way or this way, I just slide it back. If you're working along with me on this video, probably a good idea to stop and go ahead and put in your horizon line, vanishing point, and draw the shapes I'm using. That'll save you a little time. All right. And again, I erase the horizon line behind the cube, and I erase my guidelines. I like this little eraser. Got it at Michael's. I'm sure you can get it at any art supply store. Okay. All right, so there is my 3-dimensional cube right there. All of my lines should be vertical. I will offer up a disclaimer and tell you that sometimes the camera I'm using will distort the lines, especially around the edges. So if they don't look perfectly vertical, make sure yours are. Okay, let's move on to some other forms. Let's do triangles next. And any type of triangle anywhere on the picture plane. And remember, where you place it is going to determine what it looks like. But I'm going to go back and follow my same steps. I drew my shape first using a ruler. Then I'm going to look at the corners in this case and see which ones I can draw lines back to the vanishing point. Well, in this case, can't draw here because, I don't see that. It's not transparent. I can take one from the top of the triangle and from the right bottom. So again, same thing. I line up with a vanishing point. Let's get that lined up better. Draw my line back into the distance. Same thing here at the bottom. Draw my line back to the distance. And again, my lines always end at the point. I can't emphasize that enough. Okay, so drew my shape, drew my lines back to the vanishing point. My next step is to cut off the form in a way that it doesn't go all the way there. A vertical line would look kind of strange on this one because this is not a vertical line. So I go to this edge, line up my straight edge on that line, and slide it back. In this way, these two lines are parallel, meaning they never meet. And then let me erase my guidelines. That's pretty simple. Okay. All right, let's do the triangle up here above the horizon line just to continue with triangles. And I'm going to repeat myself a lot here. Draw the shape first, determine which corners can have a line drawn to the vanishing point and put it in. I know that this bottom corner can go back. And if you remember from part 1 video, as long as I have my straight edge lined up with the vanishing point, I can avoid extra erasing by just drawing the line part of the way back. And I hate erasing, so I like to do that. All right, I can draw a line from this point. Again, make sure it's lined up with your vanishing point. And then, in this case, I have one from here as well. And line up with the vanishing point and draw that one back. Okay, again, all 3 of these lines end at the vanishing point. I just didn't draw them all the way back. A lot of my students would try to freehand it. Doesn't work. This is a very technical drawing. All right, so I need to end these off or cut them off. I'm going to go to the side of the triangle. I am going to line up my straight edge just one side at a time. One side at a time is very important. You'll see that as I go. I'm going to draw from here and I'm going to stop here because the only part I'm ending is this side. Now, common sense tells me I need to do something here. I get a lot of students try to draw like this. Doesn't work that way. That's not going to look correct. And I always say if it doesn't look correct to you, it probably is not. All right, line up my straight edge with the bottom of the triangle shape. Slide it downwards until I meet this corner here. Draw it in, and there you go. Let me erase the little tails here. And there we go. So those are triangles. Let's move on to a circle. This is kind of a challenge because if you look at the shape you drew, and yes, I used a stencil on this, I don't have any corners. And, you know, step 2 is to look at the corners and determine which one can have lines taken back to the point. Well, don't have any corners. So I work a little backwards with a circle. Take my straight edge and I put it on the vanishing point. Hold my pencil and I pivot it until it hits the circle. I'm going to do that again. Pencil on the vanishing point, straight edge on the pencil, pivot it until it hits the circle. Where it hits the circle, that's where my line comes back. All right, let's do it on the other side. I'm right-handed, so this is a little weird. All right, pencil on the vanishing point, straight edge on the pencil, pivot it up until it hits it. Do that again. Pivot it up until it hits your circle. And that's where your lines go from. My students, especially the younger ones, would always say, oh, Mrs. Wood, it's like the bat symbol or a spotlight. And yeah, that's the case. But again, we're going to end this off a little bit. Now, being an artist, I'll be honest, I tend to just do this and I kind of freehand it. That's not always the best way. So I go back to my stencil. Here was the circle I used. Well, I can't use the same one because the circle gets smaller as it goes back, as you can see. So what I have to do is go to a smaller stencil and fit it in between here. Not a smaller stencil, excuse me, a smaller circle. So you can see I started with this one, and I'm going to go to the smaller one, and I'm going to fit it in between these lines. Okay, and you can see where it hits this line and this line. Unfortunately, I don't have a smaller circle, or I would use that. All right, and so here, I'm sorry I missed a little there. Here is where you end off the circle. Okay, so again, if you feel like you want to freehand it, go ahead. Just make sure it's a curve, because actually, if you could see through this, this is a circle here behind it. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to you. Again, more you practice, better it's going to get. If this were a transparent form, I would see the other end of the cylinder right there. So actually that's what you're doing. You're taking your circle, making it into a cylinder. All right, that's just a little different because it doesn't have any corners. Take my little brush, get rid of some of that. All right, and practice the circle a couple times. If you have any questions about it, doesn't sound right, you can go ahead and ask me in the comments, and I'll try to help you out. All right, unusual forms. These don't really have a particular name. They're just kind of angled forms that I drew off the top of my head. Again, let's follow the same steps. Here's my shape. Here are my corners. Okay, which corners can go back to the vanishing point with a line? All right, well, this bottom one is one right here. And again, I'm going to draw my line part of the way back because I don't want to do all the erasing. It's still lined up with the vanishing point. So I can do the bottom. I can do the top. Again, line it up. Draw it back. All right, but what a lot of people miss is this right here. Okay, this is a corner as well. So line it up and draw it back. All right, next step, drew my shape, took my lines to the vanishing point, and I have to cut it off. Now, if you've been practicing and doing this, you can probably figure out how this one ends. Remember when we did the triangle here, I said do one side at a time? Same with this. So I'm going to line up and just do this side first. Line it up, slide it back. All right, then I'm going to end this side, line it up, slide it back. Get rid of my extra little tails there and get rid of these. Now, I will tell you, your work is going to look a little different than mine depending on how big your forms are. We'll get the horizon line behind there. Depending on where you place your shapes. So if you follow the same steps every time, it's going to work for you. All right, let's do this one down here, and then we'll do the star, and we'll be done with this one. Okay, right here, again, drew the shape, taking the lines back to the vanishing point. Line up my straight edge. We know we can take one from here as well. And one from here. Now, we have a situation here which might be a little tricky. I don't plan these ahead of time. But let's see if we can take a line back to the vanishing point from this far corner. And yes, we can. We're going to see just a little bit of the top. All right, back to our steps. My next step is to cut off the form. And you'd be surprised how many people just like want to draw one line right there. It's not going to look correct. So again, one side at a time. We'll do this line segment first. Just like that. We'll do this line segment from here to here, like that. And then we'll finish off the top. And remember, we see the top because it's below my horizon line. This segment from here to here. And it gets a little tricky because it's skinny, but just take your time. All right, let's erase my extra. Okay, very last form we're going to do is the star. And again, once you've done all these other ones, star is going to be easy. All right, I've got my shape. My next step is to use my vanishing point to draw lines back in the distance. Let's see which lines I can take back, or where I can take back lines. All right, from this corner, again, I lined it up. I'm going to draw these all the way back this time because there's not that much of a distance. I can do this one right here. And knowing what I know already from doing this shape and this one, I can do one from right here. Okay, so there's the bottom of it, but I want you to look closely at these corners. I want you to see if there's any other corners from which I can draw a line to the vanishing point. There are two more corners. One is from here, and I stop short because I don't want to erase a lot. One of them is from here, because if the star form were up above my head, I would be able to see underneath these areas. So, okay, let's end it off. If you're with me so far, I appreciate your patience. Let's do this line segment here to here because we always do one side at a time. Line it up, slide it down. All right, we'll do this line segment from here to here, line it up, slide it down. Okay, so that's the bottom of that. I'm going to go ahead and erase my extra lines. Sometimes they can cause confusion, especially if you're stacking or overlapping. I didn't do any of that in this video just because there's enough going on trying to do the different forms. But you can definitely stack and overlap these. If you watch video 1, you learned how to do that. All right. I have this bottom part here. Just shade that in for reference. All right, I've got to end this side and this side. Think about our steps so far. The same thing we've repeated every time. I'm going to end this line segment from here to here. And I'm gonna stop it about right there where I stopped the line. Close to it. All right, so there's that side right there. And then I've got to end this one. This one's a little tricky, similar to this one, because it's kind of skinny. But again, follow my rules. I should say follow the steps. I don't like rules. Steps is easier. Okay, and there we go. Simple forms like the rectangle, the triangle, and the circle, and more complex forms. Okay, thank you for your patience with me and sticking with me through the whole video. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. I also want to thank my dogs who slept through this one and didn't go crazy barking while I was talking and recording. Have a good day, y'all. Happy drawing.